Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today on this Saturday at noon after you've probably spent many hours during the week also staring at a computer. So we really appreciate you being here. My name is Jenna and Bailey.
And I'm Bailey.
Yeah, and we are the Adopt a Stream state coordinators. And today we're going to be talking to you about citizen science and healthy waters and how those two combined has led to our program, Adopt a Stream. So before we get started, I just have a quick question for you all, and that is, what comes to your mind when you hear the word science? So you can kind of drop words that come to your mind either in the chat, or if this is okay with Lewis and Brandy, unmute yourself and just say it out loud. I actually cannot see the chat right now, so maybe Bailey, can you read them? Do we have a chat in Microsoft Teams?
Yes, there is a chat.
There is.
And we have Martha, she says, verifiable.
Okay, verifiable, yeah. Anybody else?
Matt says, test tubes and white coats.
Test tubes and white coats, yes. I agree. I think that oftentimes we think of things like that when we think about science, things like microscopes and maybe atoms, maybe really complicated chemical compounds. And also, I got the test tubes on there, the beakers. I feel like they're kind of in the same range. This one, we have the double helix DNA and also maybe really thick, heavy, dense books full of scientific concepts that we think are way too complicated for us to understand. And more recently, something that is an addition to what we think about when we think about a science might be the coronavirus icon. And so I think that all of these things are involved in different fields of science, which is true, but these often stereotypical items associated with science really purvey a sense that science is something really difficult, or that it's only for really smart people who can understand what's in those books, or maybe it's only for people who can afford an education where they can work in a lab that it has enough money to be able to buy all of these really expensive pieces of equipment like microscopes and test tubes and lab coats and things like that, which I think oftentimes makes science seem really unapproachable and inaccessible. But I think when we really boil all of these complicated ideas down, the concept that all scientific disciplines have in common is going to be curiosity, right, and observation. So when we think back to when we learned the scientific method in elementary school, observation was kind of like that first step. And I think that making observations and asking questions and being curious based on those observations is really at the heart of science. And so, did we progress yet? Okay, sorry. Here we go. Okay. And so I think it's summed up perfectly by this quote by Sally Ride, who was the first American woman in space in 1983. And when she said, "Science is curiosity, and we all have natural curiosity." And I think that second sentence, that we all have natural curiosity, is really powerful, right? Because human beings, we are naturally curious creatures. I think that's a characteristic that has led to the evolution of our society over time. And really, like, allowing yourself to dive in and explore those curiosities is something that is accessible to everyone and that everyone can do. And so kind of with that newer framework of a concept that science is curiosity, I have another question for you all, which is, what comes to your mind when I say citizen science? Again, you can either drop it in the chat or maybe unmute yourself and say something that comes to mind. Just a disclaimer, I think that citizen science also can be slightly problematic in its naming. Citizen often excludes certain groups of people. So other words for citizen science could be community science or volunteer monitoring or public participation in scientific research. So those sorts of things.
So I've heard of this nomenclature, so to denote democratizing science. Like a lot of Wikipedia pages, for instance, aren't modified by people with PhDs.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and we have Elizabeth in the chat. She says, the public good.
Yeah. I love that idea of democratizing science and making science accessible. I think too oftentimes also there are all these paywalls for scientific papers and other such things. And so even if you are a member of the public who's not necessarily in a scientific field, you can't even access that information, which goes against the ideas of democracy.
Yeah, we have some oh, sorry. We have some other great ones coming in. I just want to read them really quick before we move on. Mark says science for the benefit of your local community. And Matt says regular people taking an interest in the overall health of the people and nature present in their community.
Yes. Oh, I really love those last two ideas. Those are exactly kind of what I think a lot of people think is citizen science and really what it is. So here again, we have some other icons that maybe this key is unlocked because citizen science is accessible and you don't need to have a PhD to participate in these binoculars because as one of the people dropped in the chat, yes, it is just people being curious and about their interests in taking those observations. And also, it doesn't have to be an individual person and their own individual interests either. It can be them working with their community, as someone said, kind of benefiting your community, and can be viewed as a hobby. So over here we have theater, we have music, we have traveling and playing video games, and all of those things are different hobbies. And citizen science can be incorporated and viewed just like a hobby. And oftentimes, I'm a little biased, but I would say that citizen science is super fun. It's a way to, again, kind of dig in and explore your curiosities just with yourself, or if you want to incorporate your friends or your family, you can make it as involved as you want it to be. Whoops, sorry. Which is really, really awesome. And so I think that and all of these icons and ideas that we're talking about are kind of getting across the same idea, right? That citizen scientists are curious people, or maybe they're concerned people who may collaborate with professional scientists or may not in ways that advance scientific research on whatever topic it is that they care about. And I think that the best thing about citizen science is that there's probably a project out there for almost any interest or any concern you can think about. So maybe you've always wanted to be a better birder, or maybe you know someone who is affected by a certain disease and you want to be a solution to help fight and combat that disease. Or maybe you were always interested in astrophysics, but you went into a different field because you didn't think you were smart enough or something like that. So citizen science can be used in many different ways, from just deepening your exploration of your interests, or even some people use it as a way to get experience and even switch fields if that's something that they wanted to do. So some examples of citizen science projects that are related to interests and concerns. So let's say maybe you had a loved one who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and you wanted to help researchers find a new Alzheimer's treatment. Then you can do that with this project that's denoted up on the upper left-hand corner called Stall Catchers, which is a gamified citizen science project from Cornell University, where everyday people help scientists look through thousands of images and identify blocked brain capillaries, and that research could help find better treatments for Alzheimer's. Or maybe you're concerned about climate change impacts. Climate change is a very scary existential threat that is happening right now and causing an increase in extreme precipitation events, which will probably lead to more landslides that will not only harm people, but will also harm property, right? And so NASA scientists are trying to build like a global inventory of landslides to help communities prepare for these disasters. Or maybe you don't have a specific concern necessarily, but you're just interested in learning more about a topic. And maybe the topic is galaxies. So Galaxy Zoo is a citizen science project where people examine telescopic images and help identify what could be potential galaxies, which is, I think, a super cool one. As Lewis read in my bio, I'm a super big bird nerd. So my favorite citizen science project is eBird. And so that, I think, is very accessible and a really great project. So it's a global online database of bird records that's used by hundreds of thousands of birders all over the world. And so you view different birds, you log your observations, and those observations can be viewed and can be used by anyone. So what if you are interested in seeing like an American goldfinch? You've never seen one before. You could log on to eBird, you could put in your address, you could see where are the nearest sightings of American goldfinches around you, and then you could go there and try to get a view of that bird, for example, if that's something you're interested in. And I think something also that's neat is each different citizen science project has a different way to get involved. So typically it's data collection. So eBird is data collection, collecting all of those bird observations and sightings. It's also data processing, and also the landslides is data collection. But processing would be more like the Stall Catchers project or the Galaxy Zoo project, where there is all this information out there in these images, and the scientists just need help to kind of process and go through all those images. And for many of these, yes, machine learning is helpful, but the human eye, in some cases, is necessary to be able to distinguish between fine features in certain images. And so the great thing about citizen science is that it can be used in whatever way works best for you. So whether you want it to use it on an individual level to increase your knowledge of bird migratory patterns, or whether you want to contribute to a global database of landslides to try to protect people from climate change impacts. It's all up to you. And the other thing is that citizen science is just a wonderful way to collect so many data points. So this is a picture from the eBird database, and where over 500,000 citizen scientists have collected over 737 million observations, which is just crazy if you think about it. So this project has been around for about 17 years, and has had, you can just see the global expanse of all of these data that are all over the world. And then maybe think about, if there were a few scientists who were interested in a few species, how long would it take them to collect 737 million observations? Well, they would have to fly all over the world, first of all. They would have to do thousands and thousands of point count surveys or misnetting or whatever you have, and it would probably be unachievable in their entire lifetime. They wouldn't be able to collect that many observations. But because of just observant everyday people who are curious and enjoy watching birds, these observations can be done at geographic and computational scales that have never been seen before. And these data are so important and used for conservation planning. They're used for trying to determine which sites need habitat management or habitat protection, and even to inform law and policy. So out of all of, for the scientific, like the scientists out there who may be in the audience right now, data from eBird, I think, have been used to inform over 300 scientific publications. And so I think that that is just really speaks to the volume and the importance of citizen science and how powerful it can be. So although anyone can, from anywhere in the world, can contribute to the eBird database, if we zoom in a little bit to where we are right now in the southeast in Georgia, we don't have a bird database, but we have a water quality database, and it looks about something like this. So anyone in the world can contribute data to our water quality database, but it is more focused on Georgia and on maybe a little bit into the surrounding states of Georgia. And so since the inception of Georgia AdoptAstream in the mid-1990s, 29,000 scientists have collected over 302,000 observations. So not quite as big as the eBird database, but I think that that's a little bit something different. But still, we're able to collect so much data and use these data for really awesome projects to help with us with water quality. So now Bailey's going to tell us a little bit more about a Georgia AdoptAstream, and out of all of the citizen science project topics out there that I just kind of went through, why water?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jenna. That was such a great presentation. I love seeing all the citizen science projects, but she asked a great question: why water, and why is that so important to us at AdoptAstream, but also to everyone here? So just before we dive in, we can see here on our slide, here's our logo. We are Georgia AdoptAstream. We are the volunteer water quality monitoring program for the state of Georgia. It's kind of a mouthful, but and what's also a mouthful is that we are housed in the Watershed Protection Branch of the Environmental Protection Division, which is a state regulatory agency. So here again, we're asking, why would a state regulatory agency that focuses so much on something completely different than citizen science and outreach and the programs that are in our unit, why would they house this program within EPD, and what does that say about the importance of water and water quality across our state? So our next slide is going to tell us why water is so important. So we know that it's incredibly important. It's one of the building blocks of life. Basically, every single thing that we have ever known to exist, and all the things that are living right now, we know in some way, shape, or form need water to survive, whether that's by drinking water, breathing oxygen through the water, or simply having internal processes driven and maintained by water. It is 100% essential to all living things. So without giving a fully comprehensive biochemistry lesson here, just want to tell y'all some pretty cool and really important properties that make water so vital. And we can see kind of our top graphic here on the left-hand side of the slide. This is showing what a water molecule is comprised of. And we know H2O, right? But if we're looking at the picture of this and the depiction, we see that we have a positively charged pole with those hydrogen atoms right there, and then we have the oxygen, and we have a negatively charged pole. So this is going to result in a polar molecule, and water is a very special polar molecule in that it can create all these different kinds of bonds and do all of these really special things, and it's gotten the name the universal solvent. So because of its polarity and the bonds that water can easily make and break, water can dissolve a great variety of molecules, and that is incredibly important to our life processes, but also to the plants and animals and other organisms around us, because that allows the transfer of nutrients, the transfer of oxygen into different cells within our bodies and other cells within other organisms that we all need to survive. So that's just one way, or I guess kind of a multitude of ways, kind of I packed into one way there. And then our next graphic, you can kind of see here, we see a hydrated versus a dehydrated cell. So cells really need structure. They absolutely have to have that structure and that shape to be able to perform all the processes needed for that cell to survive. And water is incredibly important in that process. So maintaining that pressure through osmosis, and then we have cells that also all have membranes, and water is incredibly important in establishing those membranes and then maintaining them as well. So we want to make sure that all the nutrients are getting in the cell and then all the toxins are getting out, and water is the way that those things happen, or water-based substances like blood, for example, in our bodies. So kind of the nitty-gritty and a quick little biochem rundown there of why water is important in all of these processes. But if we're taking it from there, we know that water is integral to life in that way. So if we're looking at our world here, we can see that it's integral to our whole planet. Our planet is covered in 70% water, and we all need it to survive. So, and we're thinking, like Jenna mentioned NASA earlier, I kind of fell into a NASA pit when I was looking into their website. They have so many interesting studies and things going on there. But if you ask any scientist that's looking for life outside of the bounds of Earth, where are you going to find life? And where are you looking? Straight from the mouth of astrophysicists at NASA, they say you have to find water to find life. So there we have it. We know it's incredibly important, and that's how we know. And so our next slide is going to tell us a little bit more about how incredibly powerful water is. So we know that it's integral to life and all of these processes, but we also know that water can be incredibly powerful in a physical way. It can physically alter ecosystems. So this photo that we're seeing here on the slide is taken from National Geographic, and it's of the Grand Canyon. And we see the Colorado River running through the Grand Canyon. We know that the Grand Canyon was obviously influenced by some other geological changes, but we can definitely give some credit to the Colorado River and how it has carved its way through the Grand Canyon and changed some of that geology. So rivers on their own do have the power, the erosive power, to create valleys, of course, over long periods of time. But if we're looking at, for this specific example, the Colorado River naturally has that erosive power of water, that rushing power that's going to actually erode some of that geology, but then we combine that with flooding of the Colorado River, and it's going to result in downcutting. So large boulders and rocks are going to be pulled into the Colorado River waterway and washed downstream, and those boulders and rocks and different types of sediment that are pulled in, they're going to act as chisels on the landscape around that waterway and going to start carving out different things. So we can see that over long periods of time, kind of mapped out how water can be incredibly physically powerful. So we know where water is in the world is important, and its movements are important for impacting ecosystems and establishing ecosystems, but also where that water is just determines what kind of life can be found in that area. So probably the most important aspect for determining and maintaining the life and the quality of life found in waterways and the surrounding ecosystems that depend on waterways is the quality of water. So our next photo here on the slide, as you heard at the beginning, I'm pretty fond of hellbenders. These are the largest salamanders found in the southeast, and these amazing, cool, weird little creatures are critically threatened due to impaired water quality. So we can see these little folds in its skin up here. It breathes in oxygen through the water, and it's going to derive all its oxygen through there. It's completely dependent on water and water quality. These organisms cannot really tolerate any types of pollution, because if you can imagine, if you're breathing through your skin, you can't not breathe in toxic pollutants that are in the water. You can't really stop that from happening. So these organisms, these salamanders, are at threat from rising water temperatures. They're not able to regulate as well as we are that water temperature, and then sedimentation and erosion from maybe like construction projects or other things that are going on. Those are going to clog their skin, so they won't be able to breathe. The same with those toxic pollutants. And these are all threatening the water quality that make it possible for these, what I think are amazing creatures, to survive. Another quick example I wanted to throw in, and we can see here, is coral bleaching. And another parameter that we focus on as part of our studies with Georgia Adopt a Stream is water temperature. And the water temperature of the ocean is having all kinds of effects that scientists never really knew about before, and that's causing many different reactions in there. And the coral is being bleached, so essentially the coral is dying off. It cannot tolerate these higher temperatures. So then all of the species that are dependent on these coral reefs are also being affected just by one simple parameter change. So these are things that we can measure, we can track. Also, if you're interested in learning more about coral bleaching and ocean acidification that's tied into that, we do have a conference that's going on right now, and we have a session that just happened last week about this that was really incredible. So we can give you more information about that later, but just wanted to throw that in. Our next slide, so we've learned about how important water quality is, and maybe how just one thing within the water beneath the surface that we never see, we never think about, can change and have widespread impacts. So we know all of that now, and so maybe we can be a little more aware about the water that is really all around us all the time. If you look on a map near you, you're going to be sure to find at least one little blue line that's maybe a stream, or maybe there's a lake near you, or a river. So these things are all around us. So now it's time we can apply that natural curiosity that Jenna told us about earlier, that we all naturally have, to these areas that are right in our backyard. So this picture on the left here, these are my little brothers playing in my grandmother's backyard stream. So it could be as simple as, us going down there, playing and seeing what we can find, them just making up games and exploring and having fun as kids. Or it can be the curiosity, like my grandmother asking me, is that stream healthy? Is it clean? Is it safe for my grandbabies to be playing out there? So it could be as small as that. Or if we take a look at this next picture, we see it's taken from Chattahoochee Riverkeeper. So this is the city of West Point. I don't know, I can see it pretty well on my side, but the city of West Point, their drinking water intake is right here where this arrow is. So, and then we see kind of all this muddy, murky things right here on the side. That's all erosion and sedimentation that's happening. And this picture doesn't tell us why, but if we were monitoring, we were out making observations and putting our curiosity to work, we could find out why that is, and see how the whole city of West Point is being affected by maybe just one small thing in the watershed. So our next slide, is going to tell us how we can use Georgia Adopt a Stream and some programs that we offer to you, to community scientists and citizen scientists across the state and beyond, to really just tap into that curiosity and learn more about what you're curious about. So we do have the workshops that are listed here. We have some chemical and bacterial and macroinvertebrate types of monitoring, where we go out and we really just get a snapshot of what your water quality is looking like and maybe potential adverse effects. And really, you're just learning, you're getting familiar with that stream. And by doing this type of monitoring, by making these observations, taking these data points, you are monitoring the heartbeat of your stream. So every time we have a data point, we're tracking that heartbeat and we're getting more familiar with our area. We also offer some different programs, and these are going to be a little less equipment heavy, still accessible just like our other ones, but we have some visual types of monitoring where we're looking to assess physical changes and things that might be happening maybe in your backyard stream, maybe wherever else that you are near a water body, and we're going to see any changes that are happening. And then amphibian monitoring, so you can stick a PVC pipe in the ground and catch some cool, neat little creatures and see what they tell you about the water quality in your area.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Bailey, for talking about why water is important, how it influences life processes, and also going a little bit into the programs that Adopt-A-Stream offers. So this is just an example of how Adopt-A-Stream data have been used. So in this particular example, Adopt-A-Stream data were used by universities and nonprofits to inform conservation decisions. So this poster was presented at our annual water science poster session at the conference that Bailey mentioned a few slides ago. So Dr. Jonathan Davis and two of his undergraduate students at Young Harris College used Adopt-A-Stream data. They used that chemical, bacterial, and macroinvertebrate data to examine water quality parameters in relation to land use, specifically in the Hiwassee Water Basin. And so through their analysis and their results, they were able to identify high priority streams that need restoration efforts and that have very, very low water quality. And not only, it didn't just stop there, they then communicated these results to Mountain True, which is a nonprofit that works in the Hiwassee River Basin and does stream restoration projects to better inform kind of the priority that they should place on certain streams in their area. So this is just one example of how the individual data that you might collect for, as the example Bailey gave, the grandmother who has a stream running through her backyard, who's interested if it's safe for her grandchildren, those same data can be used to inform larger scale projects like these that are across watersheds or that are across the entire state of Georgia. Some of our Adopt-A-Stream data are also used in the State of Our Waterways report that's submitted by the state of Georgia to the Environmental Protection Agency every 2 years to classify which streams have low water quality and which streams don't, which streams are impaired and which streams are not. And so the data that you are inputting are used in so many, many different ways. So here again are the map of our sites that we have all over the state of Georgia. The green shading that you see on the different little bubbles is how many observations have been put. So the lighter green ones, there haven't been as many observations, and the darker green ones, there have been more observations that are associated with that site. And then you can see again that it goes into kind of surrounding states. And right now, for our active sites, we kind of have a big old hole right in the middle of central Georgia around Macon area. So I'm not sure where people are joining us from today, I guess mostly Metro Atlanta. But if you know anyone who's in that area who's interested in getting involved, then be sure to tell them about that. And then we just have some pictures of, I think sometimes too easily people are reduced to data points. And so including the actual people, everyday people and groups who are working at these specific sites that are just shown by these little balloons on the map, right? So this is one school group that's working in Metro Atlanta. This is a group that's working at the Finizzi Swamp. Actually, it's not, it's south of Augusta. And then this is another group that is working somewhere else within the state of Georgia. And you can also see that it doesn't matter who you are, where you live, whether you're young, whether you're a student, whether you're older, whether you're retired, there's some way that you can get involved with Adopt-A-Stream if you want to. So becoming a citizen scientist with Adopt-A-Stream not only allows you to explore that curiosity that we've kind of been harping on this whole presentation, but it also connects you to your local waterways, right? And your community, and it also contributes to that broader watershed research that's going on, not only around Georgia, but around the entire Southeast. So if you have any questions, we would be happy to answer them. This is all of our contact information. We have our website up here, our email, which is the easiest way to get in contact with us if you're interested in starting monitoring of any sort, and then our 2 social media handles if you would like to follow us. So at this time, yeah, we're happy to answer any questions you have.
Thanks, Jenna. Thanks, Bailey. Everyone, feel free to ask your questions in the chat if you prefer not to unmic your microphone or unmute your microphone.
Matt asked a great question. Bailey, I don't know if you want to take this one. He asked, how does one get started monitoring the waterways in your community?
Yeah, that is a great question. So there are lots of different ways that you can get involved. I think the best way to get started is to just figure out what you're most interested in, and whether that is looking at maybe the organisms that are living in that area, or if you want to see how high the bacterial counts are, if that's something you're concerned with. So what are you most concerned with or most interested in your area? And then our programs can be tailored to you and what you're most interested in. So, but a great way to get started is just checking out the website, but also just going out and exploring a little bit, and then we can kind of point you in the direction of what might best serve you. So I know that's not fully comprehensive, but there's so many different types of programs that I don't want to be like overwhelming. You can do a million things.
Yeah, I would just add to that, we have workshops that you can attend. And so once you decide whether you're interested more in that chemical monitoring or maybe that bacterial or the macroinvertebrate where you're in there looking at all the insects that are living in your stream, we have workshops based on all those different types of monitoring. So maybe Bailey, we could put a link in the chat to our workshop calendar, and you can see when the next workshop is, if it's near you, and you can sign up for that. So because of COVID and us taking precautionary measures, unfortunately our workshop sizes are a little limited right now. They're limited to 10 people. And then a lot of trainers are doing the classroom portion virtually, and then they're meeting in person, socially distant, with people to conduct the field portion of the workshop, to actually go out onto the stream and show you how you would do the different monitoring techniques and stuff. But I would recommend, as Bailey said, getting started, thinking about which programs you're most interested in, and then attending a workshop based on that program. And then if for any reason there is a workshop or that you don't see a workshop for the program you're interested in, you can always email us at the state staff at our email address that was on that last slide, or you can also find on our website, and you can request a workshop in your area, and we would be happy to put something together for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I did want to jump in and say, Melissa, the next question on here was Melissa asking, do we know if Stone Mountain Park has an active monitoring group? And yes, they do. Naomi is the contact there. I don't know her email address off the top of my head. I don't want to share that either. But yes, they do have an active monitoring group. I don't know what it looks like right now because of COVID and the precautions that they're taking. I'm sure they're being extra careful, so you could definitely get in touch with them to see what's going on there. Brandy's asking, are there specific things citizens can do to protect their waterways other than helping with research?
Yes, absolutely. I think that there are lots of things you can do to reduce, a lot of the things that are affecting our waterways and increasing toxins and pollutants have to do with impervious surfaces and stormwater runoff. So if there are things and activities you can do to reduce those two things, then that is really beneficial. So for an example, creating a rain garden is one way to reduce stormwater runoff into the streams. Another thing you can do is stream restoration work, which isn't necessarily connected to research. Another thing you can do is to ensure, well, stream restoration kind of goes hand in hand with ensuring that there's a riparian buffer, if you essentially remove all the vegetation that's in with about 25 to 50 feet within that stream, whenever there are really heavy rain events, all of that sediment is going to rush into that stream because there's nothing to stop and absorb the water. But if there are trees and other vegetation that are planted around the stream, then that water can be slowed down, it can be absorbed by the roots, and you're not going to have as much sedimentation occurring in that stream. And so I would say stream restoration efforts, rain gardens, and also reducing your own water usage. I mean, people in the US use an insane amount of water that's unnecessary. So looking at your own water usage within your household and looking at ways that you can reduce that. And we also have some links on our website. I can put it in the chat as to answering that question and going into a little bit more detail. I don't know, Bailey, if you want to add to that.
Oh yeah, that sounds great. I think, we can all think about different ways in our daily lives how we can impact and just kind of reducing our water usage, like you said, reducing our plastic uses, being mindful of how often we're driving, just all those things that are related to our carbon footprint. And but yeah, I mean, other specific things, I would say just getting involved in your community too, like being involved with maybe local nonprofits in your area or just community organizations. They can be incredibly powerful. Just connecting with people in your area and having that local impact can be really great. So.
The next question is from Amy. Bailey, if you want to answer this one, what type of equipment is needed to get started?
Yeah, so again, this kind of depends on what you're most interested in. We do have those chemical, bacterial, and macroinvertebrate monitoring programs where we offer workshops and we kind of talk you through. You get some background information and then some hands-on practice, and then you take that certification quiz. Those are all aspects of our workshop. But during that, you get hands-on practice using the equipment. So for our chemical kit, we have tools that will help you measure temperature and conductivity. So we have a little meter in there, and then we have sample vials and reagents for measuring dissolved oxygen. So we do have like a little kit that either we can loan out or local coordinators in your area might be able to loan out to you for those. For the macroinvertebrates, we just have nets that you would use to conduct that protocol, that methodology to collect macros. And then for bacterial, we collect water samples in what we call WhirlPack bags, so just like little plastic bags that we can seal, and then we pipette the samples onto Petrifilm plates. So that's kind of a brief overview of each of those and the equipment required. We are more than happy to help get in touch with you to connect you with someone who has equipment or loan that to you from the state office. If you are going through those workshops and you have a stream identified and things like that, of course, we're more than happy to help you get started. So yeah, and our next question, Jenna, if you want to answer, it's from Elizabeth. It says, do you take a sample from a stream? Then what do you do?
Yes, you do take a sample from a stream, and then what you do will depend, again, as Bailey said, on the type of monitoring that you're doing. So you're going to essentially do whatever that monitoring protocol is. Typically, people take their samples from the stream, and if you're doing chemical, for example, you're doing a titration to determine what the dissolved oxygen level is, and that titration is done at the stream. But if you're doing bacterial monitoring, for example, then you would need to incubate your plates. So you would take your sample, you would go home, and then you would do that plating and that incubation within your house at your home. So after you take the sample from the stream, you're going to kind of go through the protocol, whether that's at the stream or whether that's going to be at your house. And then once you have the data, then you would input it into our online database that I showed a picture of that big map before. And so all those instructions, we have like a how to get started link that we'll also throw in the chat. And hopefully if you have any follow-up questions, just again, put it in the chat right now and we can follow up with you. The next question is from Ray, who asked, where can I procure a comprehensive list of monitoring options or volunteer needs?
Yeah, Ray, I put a workshops descriptions link in there. So that's going to tell you all the workshops that we offer and then what we offer as a part of those. So that's going to be kind of what that looks like. And then for the monitoring options and then volunteer needs, those are going to be primarily equipment. The descriptions tell you, how often you would be monitoring as a part of that protocol, and what it takes pretty much. And then you can kind of go from there. I can also drop an equipment link, but usually that's something that we are talking with you about during the workshop and then following the workshop. We are involved in that process and helping you procure equipment. Unless you like have grants, or if you need help writing a grant to get your own, if you're a part of a bigger group, those are things that we also have experience with. So if that's not enough information, Ray, feel free to send us an email and I can definitely send you some more resources. Mark is asking, how much time does Adopt a Stream volunteering typically require?
That's a great question. Also dependent on the type of monitoring you're doing, but I would say we keep going back to chemical, bacterial, and macroinvertebrate just because those are the most common types that people do. And so some types of monitoring are once a month. For example, chemical monitoring and bacterial monitoring are once a month. And when you go out and take your sample, to the time that you input your data could be maybe 1 to 2 hours. So 1 to 2 hours a month. And for bacterial, it's a little bit longer because you have to wait for that 24-hour incubation process. But I would say a few hours a month. And then for macroinvertebrate sampling, that's quarterly. So that's going to be every 3 months. Although the time commitment involved for going out and capturing and identifying the macroinvertebrates is a little bit longer. So that could take about 3 to 4 hours out there at your stream, catching the insects and going through them and identifying them. So it's either every month for like 1 to 2 hours, or it's going to be quarterly for about 3 to 4 hours. Melissa has a question that she asked, and it is, how can I see their data? And I believe she's talking about the Stone Mountain group, right? Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So yes, this is something we didn't mention, but all data that's put into our database, completely publicly accessible. So anyone can use the data on the website and download it, use it for their own purposes. So if you're interested in, like Melissa, for example, looking at Stone Mountain and just seeing what's going on in their area or your area, you can, there's a couple ways you can do that. So on our website, on our main page, we have that map, and you can look per group. You can look at each group's data and what they've been collecting. Or if you wanted to look, for example, at a specific watershed, or maybe you want to see the whole city of Stone Mountain, we also have those capabilities. So you can go to our data views, which is a little tab on our website, and then we have a view data by region. I can drop that link in here right now. This is the view data by region page, so you can filter based on what you're interested in and see what's been going on within certain time frames. You can manipulate ideally however you want to. It's not always the most intuitive, so if you ever have any difficulties with that, please contact us. We're working on making this part of the data viewing a little bit better, but it's definitely going to take some time to get that up and running. So please let us know if you can't find what you're looking for. We're more than happy to help.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah. Our next question, is there a group indicator already? We have some nasty streams and creeks running through town.
Yes, there are definitely groups in Decatur, and I would say the best way to find those groups would be to start on our main website page and use that map to zoom in to where you are in Decatur. And then when you see one of those little green bubbles, you can click on it and it will tell you which group that is, and you can click on that group page and you can get their information. So again, if you have any issues with that, we can help you. And I mean, by now we've posted lots of links, so I think, but we can post a link to our homepage too, just like this is the base, the starting point for a lot of these questions, which is awesome. Okay, Brandy's asking, does Adopt a Stream also do waterborne pathogen monitoring?
I would say not specifically. I think the closest thing that we're going to do is our bacterial monitoring program. We use that as kind of monitoring for pathogens, and we sample for E. coli is what we're looking for and counting for, and we use E. coli as an indicator species, that indicator bacteria, to let us know if the environment, what's going on there, is going to be more suitable to pathogenic bacteria and other pathogens. So I don't think specifically, but that's what we're looking for when we do bacterial monitoring.
Awesome. Melissa has signed up for a workshop.
Awesome. Yay, Melissa!
And yeah. And Martha found what she's looking for. That's awesome. Thank you guys so much again for coming out, or I guess coming to your computer screen. Yeah. And again, we're happy to answer any follow-up questions you may have when you're exploring our website or something like that. Email us anytime and we will direct you in the way that you need.
All right. Thanks, Jenna. Thanks, Bailey. And we will post all these links that you've got in the chat when we get our YouTube video up. So if y'all subscribe to the channel, you'll get to see the video and all the links that are posted here.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank y'all so much.